Hi, today I'm going to walk you through how to trim a brisket like a pro. So this here is a USDA prime brisket. There are three different grades of brisket. You have prime, then you have choice and select. Prime is the top grade. It's going to have the most marbling. This is a packer cut brisket. So it is untrimmed and it is in this plastic cryovac. It's been vacuum sealed by the butcher or the meat processor. This is about a 12-pound brisket here. So just a quick brisket anatomy here. There's basically two parts of the brisket. You got the flat, which runs the length of the brisket, and then you've got the point, which is up here and it sits on top of the flat. And the point is the moist part of the brisket and the flat is the lean part of the brisket. And so basically the idea is you want to take off all the excess fat that's not going to render out during the cook. So right here, this is a big chunk of hard fat that I always start right there and just take all that off. You can also remove some of this fat here. It's not exactly necessary, but you can trim it up as much as you'd like. Don't be afraid to be a little aggressive with your trimming. Any trimmings that you have left over, you can actually use to make some delicious brisket burgers. So anything with substantial meat on it, I put in the meat pile, and anything that's almost entirely fat, I put in the fat pile. The excess fat you can actually make tallow that you can use for frying or for cooking. Flip this guy over. And as you see here, we have a huge chunk of fat here that it's just going to burn up in the smoker. So I'm just going to cut that right off. This is a Dexter Sani Safe. I believe it's a paring knife. Anyway, this is a great knife for trimming a brisket. So you don't want to take off too much fat. Like right there, it took off a little too much. You can now see the meat underneath. But if you mess up, don't worry. It's not gonna affect the final product that much. The other thing you want to look out for is over here on the point end here. See how this is really thin compared to this side of the point? That's just going to burn up in the cooker. You want to kind of make it a uniform thickness so that nothing gets cooked too quickly and it all kind of cooks at the same pace. And I'm just going to make an aggressive cut right there. You can see tons of fat here, a little bit of meat. I'll probably trim that up before I throw it in the grinder for the burgers. So the idea is you're trying to make this brisket aerodynamic so the smoke kind of moves around it without getting hung up. And I know I love a brisket burger, so I'm taking a huge chunk off the lean side right here for burgers. Go ahead and get rid of this here too. As you see here, this is a really thin part of the point that it's just gonna crisp up if you don't take it off. And that's some really good meat there. I also like to take a little off the side so you see how much fat you're working with here. So now I have a good idea of how much fat is sitting on the top of this brisket here. And you want to trim it down to maybe about a 1/2 inch of fat left on the brisket. This is a big chunk of fat here. So if you leave too much fat on the brisket, it's not going to render out, and it's not going to be as tasty, in my opinion. All fat. And there you go. You can see now, cut a little too deep. You can see the meat underneath. If you look at the side here, you got this thick band of fat running between the point and the lean. That's called the decal here, the decal fat. And you can also, when you run it to the side, you can see how much fat is sitting on top of the brisket. Any little dips like this where you have a little indentation on the brisket, that's where your rub is going to sit, and all the juices and the grease is going to pull in there. So sometimes you'll get a little slimy spot of rub. So you want to make sure that you kind of smooth it out so it doesn't have these little pulls where you can collect rub and juices. Give it a nice, there's a lot of fat here. Another nice cut here. Again, I'm not worried about trimming too much off it because I'm going to make some delicious brisket burgers. There's that decal. Need to trim this down just a little. Okay, finally at the very tip of the point here, we've got a huge chunk of fat. Let's get that off of there. All fat, that would never render down. So I'm turning this 12-pound brisket into probably 8-9 pounder. Pre-cook. Right. And that's about good enough right there. If we're at a restaurant, they'd probably just throw that on the smoker just like that. Now, if you're at home and you have more time, you might consider taking off a little more fat. And that's how you trim a brisket like a pro.